So if you caught the interview that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry did with Oprah on Sunday evening, you know that Meghan Markle set it off. She exposed the racism in the royal family, and she talked about her experiences as a woman of color and the discrimination that her son faced before he was even born, when people in the royal family were concerned about how dark his skin would be. So in this video, we're going to trace Meghan Markle's African ancestry and her great-great-great-grandfather, who was a slave in this country, and how his choice to rename himself after the emancipation of slavery influenced her decision to identify herself however she wants to identify herself when it comes to race. And of course, me being the blogger that I am, I do have the receipts. I do have the records, the census records from Ancestry.com. If you want to use Ancestry.com to research your own ancestry, use the link in the description box so you can get $10 off and I can earn $10. All right, you guys, so Meghan Markle did an interview with Elle magazine in 2015. It was republished in 2016 when she got engaged to Prince Harry, but it's important to note it was actually written by her in 2015 before she was basically silenced by the royal family. So this is what she had to say on her own before she joined the royal family. And she said, "What are you? A question I get asked every week of my life, often every day. Well, I say, as I begin the verbal dance I know all too well. I'm an actress, a writer, the editor-in-chief of my lifestyle brand, The Tig," so basically she was a blogger, "and a pretty good cook and a firm believer in handwritten notes." She said, "It's a mouthful, yes, but one that I feel paints a pretty solid picture of who I am. But here's what happens. They smile and nod politely, maybe even chuckle before getting to their point. Right, but what are you? Where are your parents from?" And she said, "I knew it was coming, I always do. While I could say Pennsylvania and Ohio and continue this proverbial two-step, I instead give them what they're after. My dad is Caucasian and my mom is African American. I'm half black and half white." And she says, "Fast forward to the 7th grade and my parents couldn't protect me as much as they could when I was younger. There was a mandatory census I had to complete in my English class. You had to check one of the boxes to indicate your ethnicity. White, Black, Hispanic, or Asian. And there I was, my curly hair, my freckled face, my pale skin, my mixed race, looking down at these boxes, not wanting to mess up, but not knowing what to do. You could only choose one, but that would be to choose one parent over the other, and one half of myself over the other. My teacher told me to check the box for Caucasian because that's how you look, Meghan," she said. And she said, "I put down my pen not as an act of defiance, but rather a symptom of my confusion. I couldn't bring myself to do that, to picture the pit in her belly sadness my mother would feel if she were to find out. So I didn't tick a box. I left my identity blank." Y'all keep this in mind because it comes full circle. She said, "I left my identity blank, a question mark, an absolute incomplete, much like how I felt." And she said, "While my mixed heritage may have created a gray area surrounding my self-identification, keeping me with a foot on both sides of the fence, I have come to embrace that, to say who I am, to share where I'm from, to voice my pride in being a strong, confident, mixed-race woman. That when asked to choose my ethnicity in a questionnaire as in my 7th grade class, or these days to check other, I simply say, sorry world, this is not lost and I'm not one of the others. I am enough exactly as I am. Perhaps the closest thing to connecting me to my ever complex family tree, my longing to know where I come from, and the commonality that links me to my bloodline is the choice my great-great-great-grandfather made to start anew. He chose the last name Wisdom. He drew his own box." I want to get into the situation with her grandfather, who was formerly a slave. He was born into slavery, and she said he called himself Wisdom, but actually when I did my research, I found out that he legally was not able to call himself Wisdom. His name was Stephen Raglan. That was his government name, and on government documents, they list him as Stephen Raglan. He wasn't able to call himself by his own name. So even though she was inspired by him, legally, he was still oppressed. She was inspired by his freedom, but legally he was still oppressed. And that's really kind of what happened to her in the royal family. She was still oppressed. She thought she was free. She thought she was protected, but she was still being oppressed. And so let's get into her grandfather's slave schedule. A slave schedule basically lists slaves by age and owner most of the time. And so her grandfather, her great-great-great-grandfather, Stephen Raglan, he's her fourth great-grandfather on her mother's side, and he was born a slave in 1848 in Henry County, Georgia, and that's where he lived his entire life. The 1850 U.S. Census slave schedule lists him as a nameless 2-year-old male slave, the property of Lemuel Raglan, a wealthy plantation owner with a personal estate of, at the time, $19,200, but in today's money, it would be $500,000. So if you look at this schedule, they're actually using it wrong. Like it's from 1850 and it asks you to list the name of the slave owners. Like there's not even a category to list the slave names. And so that's why this is blank, because they're actually using it to list the slaves individually, one by one, according to their age. They gave each slave a number. That's how they used the form. So this seems to be the second page of the form because it starts off with slave number 8, who also happened to be 8 years old, and he was a black male. Then it goes to slave number 9, slave number 10, slave number 11, and then slave number 12, who was 2 years old, black male. That's her great-great-great-grandfather. So he was not even listed under a name. When we first see him in the census, he's listed as a number. He's number 12. Slave number 12 is her great-great-great-grandfather. Now let's fast forward to 1870. At this time, he was 22 years old. And you can see here his name is still listed as Raglan Stephen Raglan, and this is after slavery. So she says he chose the name Wisdom, but apparently it was more like a nickname because legally he still had to use his government name of Stephen Raglan, and Raglan was the name of his former owner. And you can see here he's married to a woman named Ellen, and they have, at the time, they have 2 children. One is 2 years old and one is 3 months old. And it looks like one is a boy and one is a girl. And here's a marriage certificate of when he married his wife, Ellen. It was on the 18th day of August, 1869, just 4 years after the legal end of slavery. So Meghan Markle doesn't identify herself necessarily as a black woman because she feels like she would be denying the heritage of either of her parents if she identified as one race. And it's her great-great-great-grandfather who was born into slavery and later attempted to rename himself after the emancipation of the slaves that inspired her to identify herself however she sees fit. Leave a comment and let me know what you think about Meghan Markle's situation. As always, thanks for watching.